Morning. The weather is a little out of kilter today. We've gone from 85-degree weather on Monday to 50 degrees today. Luckily, we're not suffering tragedies in terms of the weather. Are we seeing protests? Yes. Thank goodness the police, unlike 1968, when the Vietnam War was on and when kids were protesting, there were no bashing of heads, there were no deaths, and protesters were quietly removed, as they should be, for their civil disobedience. We seem not to know facts. We seem to be espousing feelings rather than facts, without knowing our geography, without knowing our history. People are taking sides against Israel without knowing what really happened on the ground. On October 6th, there was a ceasefire in place. On October 7th, the day after Simchas Torah, there was a massacre of Israelis. Luckily, 3,000 to 4,000 Hamas terrorists didn't get further into Israel, but it's left its mark on Israelis. 250,000 people have been evacuated from the southern border of Israel, all the kibbutzim that were around the Gaza Strip, and about 70,000 have been evacuated from the northern border of Israel that borders Lebanon, because Hezbollah is just as active as Hamas. Why did Israel enter the eastern area of Rafah? Very simply, their aid crossing at Kerem Shalom, which is near the eastern border of Rafah, they were bombed. 4 to 6 Israelis were killed, and 16 were wounded. So Israel went in and secured the boundary between Egypt and Rafah and the eastern Rafah area. 150,000 Palestinians made their way out of the area. It seems to me that if both the Palestinians and the Israelis, who don't want Bibi to be in power, got together, we could have a real ceasefire and a real exchange of all the hostages. We already know about 30 to 32 of them are not alive. And that's a tragedy. Why Hamas would use dead people as bargaining chips, I don't know. But they're not a group that should stay in power in Gaza or anywhere else. And I understand that there are now plans in place to have an international force go into Gaza. Have the Palestinians supply their own civil government? Have the Emirates in there? The Saudis in there? And we'll have peace. And maybe we'll be able to get rid of Hamas. Because I don't believe that the Palestinians are pro-Hamas and pro-terror. I don't think they want never-ending war. And I know, after having been in Israel, they don't want never-ending war either. There are very few Israeli troops in Gaza. They're not prepared for long-term wars. They're not prepared to capture and occupy territory, nor do they want to. They've been out of Gaza for 18 years. The fact that Hamas chose to put in 350 miles of tunnels, 10 of which they just discovered and probably are going to bomb on the Rafah Egyptian border. Egypt is happy about that. Egypt is in compliance because they don't want to see millions of refugees from Gaza come to Egypt either. So everyone wants a peace. Everyone, that is, except Hamas and Hezbollah. They don't have any other reason to survive except to have never-ending war. But if you want to be civilized, and Israel is a civilized nation, they don't bomb people unless they've been terrorized, and not being allowed or not having people want to go back to their regions until they're safe. That's perfectly legitimate. The Israelis want security. To have security, there must be a lasting ceasefire. As I've always said, a Good Friday agreement is what's necessary. The Palestinians and the Israelis, they don't necessarily have to like each other, though when they go to school together and they play music together and they go on international music and art competitions together, they seem to do very well together. So a state for two peoples, I believe, is in the making. As far as the U.S. is concerned, I've read too much about what's planned and what weapons are supposed to go to Israel. I would think it would be very difficult for Biden to override Congress. And in fact, in some of the newspapers, they're saying nothing has happened yet because Bibi has not crossed any red lines. There is no immediate takeover of Rafah, which means to me there's no excuse. You really have a ceasefire in Gaza, and Hamas should not be breaking it. And if I were a Palestinian, I'd be protesting en masse. They were happy for a ceasefire, and they should demand a ceasefire and separate themselves from the Hamas terrorists. It's no way to run a country, and it's no way to survive in the modern world. Truthfully, you look at Ukraine and your heart breaks. All Russia has done is destroy their infrastructure. Now they'll have to rebuild. They'll probably rebuild better. And what did Russia accomplish? They may actually get the Donbas region. The Donbas region that they actually had. Was it worth the sacrifice of 300,000 to 400,000 young people? I don't think so. In the 21st century, we got to be thinking about switching out of fossil fuels, switching into carbon neutral fuels, and no wars. We need an organization that stops war wherever it is. Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, Gaza, whatever you want to call it, Sudan, the Yemeni borders. Lebanon, no wars. We got climate to tackle. We got carbon to get rid of. And we need to restore our democracy. Those are important. Nobody accomplishes anything with war. The Taliban are still active. We still have ISIS in Syria and Iraq. And now Vietnam, after 55,000 deaths, American deaths, is our trading partner of choice. What did we accomplish? Think about it, folks. War is not the answer. Muscular diplomacy is. Thank you for listening.